Welcome to Blockstars, Ripple's podcast that features leaders and developers in crypto and blockchain to discuss the latest trends, technologies, and the real-world problems being solved. I'm your host, Ripple CTO, David Schwartz. In this episode, we're going to shift our focus to the importance of community in the Web3 ecosystem. We'll explore how communities drive innovation, collaboration, and adoption in the blockchain space, and how thriving developer communities foster development. I'm pleased to be sitting down with a couple of developer community pioneers, Scott Branson, longtime member of the XRP Ledger ecosystem, and David Schwartz, who recently launched XRPL Commons, an open source not-for-profit initiative based in Paris. Welcome to Blockstars. It's great to have you both here.
Thank you for having me. Really glad I'm here.
Thank you so much for having us on. I really appreciate it.
Scott, we've been working together for a while, and you do the important work of running critical infrastructure for the XRP Ledger ecosystem. Tell us more about your role with the foundation and as an educator.
So my formal role with the foundation is an advisor for social and educational outreach. And I end up spending a good amount of time engaging with universities and different educational venues to provide content to people interested in engaging with the XRP Ledger. Additionally, too, to engage universities in meeting objectives that the foundation has, so we might need a little bit of software or code or firmware or whatever it is developed. And our university partners are really well positioned to provide that. Outside of working with universities, too, I really spend a fair amount of my time engaging with different infrastructure operators, providing support, and really doing what I can to ensure that the main network, stays up and running and as diverse as possible, and that the folks engaging with that on an infrastructure level have the tools and resources and support that they need to be successful in running their infrastructure.
David, the Commons is a much newer initiative tapping into the Paris blockchain community. Tell us more about your background and how the inception of the Commons came to be.
Sure. Well, I'm an engineer and an entrepreneur. I did a few gigs in entrepreneurship and sold one of the company I started to a larger one who sent me to the US, where I lived for a few years in San Francisco. And back in 2019, I started to dig into blockchain to understand more about what it could do for some of my clients in insurance. And then when I came back to Paris 2.5 years later, I felt that this was something I wanted to investigate and dig more into. And I started to see this opportunity of creating an entity for community building and doing community organization within the XRP Ledger ecosystem. I stumbled upon the XRP Ledger by doing research about green blockchains. And I figured there's nothing like a green blockchain, but the data pointed to the XRP Ledger as the less consuming and the smallest carbon footprint in the whole blockchain space. So this is how I started investigating in it. And after meeting with a few folks in the community, I realized that there was really an opportunity for me to start XRPL Commons. So we incorporated about 4 months ago in Paris, where I think the ecosystem is ripe for welcoming the XRP Ledger after a long road of not showing a lot of interest into XRP Ledger. But recently, I've seen signs that France is showing the way in terms of regulation and giving clarity for crypto investors and crypto entrepreneurs. And Paris felt like the good place to start Commons.
So regardless of which blockchain and what project, community is going to play a significant role in Web3 and has played a significant role in the development of blockchains, and it has shaped the success of projects. The unique characteristics of these communities has an impact on innovation, decentralization, and adoption, and you can't have decentralized governance without a community. Scott, how does the XRP Ledger's decentralized nature contribute to its resilience and security, and how does the XRP Ledger Foundation support and promote this decentralization?
So really, in my mind, the security of the XRP Ledger and the resilience of the XRP Ledger are pretty much entirely based on its decentralization. There's other aspects that contribute to that, having, effective programmers working on it and reviewing the code. But really, the core security and resilience of the network is in the fact that there's hundreds of different nodes serving copies of the network all over the world. So even if one of my full history servers goes down, it's very, very easy, if somebody needed to query their account balance, they can just use a server provided by, Ripple, the XRP Ledger Foundation, decentralization. The commons are going to be running, I think, infrastructure here soon as well. So having that decentralization, you end up with something where there's really not a single point of failure. You might have times when an exchange goes offline because their infrastructure is offline, but that doesn't mean that anyone using the ledger is really impacted outside of just those exchange users. Anyone else can still use other servers or other nodes to submit transactions and engage with the ledger. So really, the decentralization has been a long journey, but I think it's contributed and grown tremendously, the resiliency and strength of the network.
So what does the XRPL Foundation do to support development and usage of the XRP ledger?
So, a multiplicity of different things. It's really front of our mindset a lot of the time. We keep a very close eye on the network, ensure that things are functioning as expected. We actively work with and engage with other server operators, to, like I said earlier, to make sure they have the resources that they need. Of course, we also publish a copy of a suggested unique node list, right, that others can subscribe to decide which validators on the network are really trustworthy, that have a long, reputation, and are geographically decentralized and running in diverse data centers and so forth. So we do quite a bit to actually, engage with the network, curate the network, not in any kind of centralized way, but in terms of just making sure that there's quality there.
The blockchain space is constantly evolving. Is it important for the foundation to stay adaptable and keep the XRP ledger relevant in an ever-changing landscape?
That's a very, very interesting question, to be honest, David. I think that there's a balance there. I can only speak for myself, not necessarily the entire foundation, but certainly there's a need to keep the ledger relevant. And at the same time, I think that we need to remember that we have a very, very, very robust network that's extremely effective and efficient at doing what it was designed to. So you're going to have financial institutions, you're going to have other potential players, right, that aren't used to moving at the speed of light. And then on the other side of that, you're going to have going back a year, people that wanted NFT projects, looking now, people that are excited about AMM and other upcoming features too. So I think there really is that balance between making sure that we have very high quality amendments, very robust code, and a very strong, secure network that isn't springing a lot of different changes on developers, while simultaneously making sure, that it's a relevant blockchain that's able to fulfill, the functions that businesses demand.
Yeah, I found that balance is exceptionally challenging for two reasons. One of them is a lot of the value of blockchains and decentralized systems is that you can rely on them to operate next year the same way they operate today. And of course, that's in tension with trying to remain relevant and trying to keep up with changes in technology. And the other one is sometimes new features impose costs on users, and the people who pay the costs aren't always the same as the people who get the benefits. It's kind of easy to make a decision when you know all the advantages and disadvantages and you're the only one affected. You can just say, do the advantages outweigh the disadvantages? It's harder when the set of people who experience the advantages and the set of people who experience the disadvantages are different people. It's quite challenging. David, tell us more about the XRPL Commons as an open source, not-for-profit initiative. How does the XRPL Commons encourage community participation and collaboration, nurturing the XRP ledger ecosystem?
Well, XRPL Commons tries to create the conditions for developers and entrepreneurs to succeed in the XRP ledger ecosystem. And by succeed, I mean finding clients, finding customers, solving real-world issues, putting their talents into and their energy into the right place. And everything we do with the community, with community members. We're just trying to, be the face of some of the community members who have things to say or things to do and try to catalyze their energy. So the first thing we do for the community is we're working on knowledge and creating learning journeys for developers. We're curious about the XRP ledger, and we do that through multiple programs. So the first one is working with universities, starting here in France and scaling that to Europe soon. Starting September, we'll be teaching in 4 different universities, blockchain and XRP ledger. And, this comes from a very top-down approach of universities having pressure to train engineers and students on everything blockchain. As the European Commission has reported, there's a skill gap in Europe, and I think it's the same in the US and in Asia. There's a huge skill gap on blockchain. And so the students are also asking for qualitative trainings from the university, and they want to graduate, including in blockchain space. So we're helping universities to design curriculum, classes, and to train teachers who already have some kind of background either in IT, computer science, or in finance. We're helping them to get the part that they don't have today, which is blockchain, and XRP Ledger is really a good entry door for students because they can start coding with the language they already know. They don't have to learn a new language. So within the time frame of a semester, they can already deliver great projects. We also have online learning, where we're working with community members to produce content for the community. So it's by the community, for the community, to address key questions that keep coming back about the XRP Ledger, or about the infrastructure, or about the governance, or multiple questions that keep being asked on Discord and other channels. So we're trying to put online really good material made by the community so it can be hosted somewhere. And then here in Paris, in our physical location, we have a classroom. It's basically a classroom where we host every other month a training for experienced blockchain developers who just want to get a sense of how they could engage with XRP Ledger, what they could use XRP Ledger for in their next project. And so the last we had was in early July. We had 20 developers coming here for 2 days. And the good thing is everything we did during this training has been recorded and will be made available online a bit later. That's the first part. That's the entry door for us to the XRP Ledger. The second part, which is one of the conditions of success for me, is getting corporations, institutions interested in understanding what blockchain can do for them. Because that's what's going to trigger orders and opportunities for developers in our community. And so we're trying to have conversations with executive committees, boards, to teach them and raise awareness about blockchain and what it could do for their organizations. And basically, we are convinced that we entered the crisis of trust the last few years, and that there's a clear opportunity for blockchain to be not the solution, but part of the solution that it could reverse that crisis. Hopefully, find a solution to that crisis. So, working with C levels in large organizations help us get the message across the board. And lastly, the last part we're working on is the community. So creating programs for entrepreneurs, developers, and future startups to engage with the community at a broader scale. The first program we're launching is called the Aquarium. It's a residency much inspired by an art residency where we invite project owners and developers to spend 3 months here in Paris, hosted, travel is paid for, accommodation is paid for. They get a stipend to live here in Paris. So we can be very inclusive and not, just work with the people that are here, but extend invitation to every bright developers who show interest to the program. And every 3 months we'll change the topic we're working on. So the first topic for October to December will be regeneration, whether that's farming, education, developing local financial systems, and empowering local economies. That's the topic we're trying to participate to or contribute to for the first residency. The next one in January will be about IP, intellectual property. And then along 2024, we have many ideas. We want to work on energy. We want to work on decentralized identity, and other ideas will come along. So in a nutshell, and that's a long one, these are the programs we're working on.
I love working with universities. When Ripple first contacted universities a couple of years ago now, we had professors who told us that, like, if they had students who wanted to work on things like AI or machine learning, they knew hundreds of resources for them, but they had nothing, like no resources for people who wanted to work on blockchain. And that's a great way to attract talent. What have your experiences been like?
Well, universities are amazing partners in the way that, they're institutions, they can scale anything you give them, they can scale it to, hundreds of students, thousands of students. Right now, we're working with a network of technological universities in France to design the curriculum for blockchain. And this network holds 150 technical universities training thousands of engineers and future developers. The good thing about that is we do it once, with the network, and then the message gets spread out. The other really good thing about universities is that they have students, and students, they do not take no for an answer. So in France, the students' organization and student associations have got together in a network called Cryptosphere. It's a network of blockchain association throughout the whole academic ecosystem. they have more than 800 members who are actively working to organize meetups, hackathon, and they also teach. So whenever there's no clear curriculum provided by university itself, the student association shows up and organizes classes. And I think it's a bit of the same in other countries I've been working with. Germany has the same kind of organization, Spain too, the UK too. I'm sure, Scott, you've seen the same in the US. Working with students association is amazing because you get the energy of people really craving for content and learning.
So either or both of you, what about the importance of events like Apex or hackathons? Are those critical community building?
Yeah, I mean, having been to several Apexes now, a few Apexes now, I guess there's only been 3 of them, but it's a great opportunity for people to get together to actually be able to network with one another. One of the priorities, kind of that the XRP Ledger Foundation emphasizes is how can we connect different projects, right? How can we get different people to utilize the code, the technology, whatever it is, right, that other projects are building on. Zum Wallet being a great example, or Bitfrost Connect, Bitfrost Wallet rather, that 2O Labs puts out, right? If other projects can link into those, it can really expedite their development timeline because they've already got a functional wallet. They don't have to reinvent the wheel kind of thing. And there's so many different, I think, examples of that in this space, and having the opportunity to network really just brings a lot more energy, a lot more clarity to what people are working on, and also those opportunities for collaboration, working efficiently, and saving time. Just beyond that, it's a blast too. Those events are really a lot of fun. It can be kind of stressful doing things like running infrastructure on a decentralized network. There's 34 validators. You've got to have the vast majority of them online, so it's nice to be able to have some time to unwind and get support, as well as, engage in the more business side of things.
Well, Scott just brought up something very controversial, so I have to ask David's opinion on it. Bifrost, beef roast, beef frost?
Well, from my French perspective, it would be Bifrost.
So you wanted to comment on events, David?
Yeah. About events. I think hackathons are, really instrumental into growing the community. Very recently, I can share that story with you. We were hosting a hackathon during the Paris Blockchain Week, and there were 3 tracks. I'm not going to name the other tracks, but our track started with, I think 4 or 5 teams. And because we were very intentional into making this hackathon meaningful, so we brought in people from the community, experienced developers who could act as mentors, who stayed over the whole hackathon, and I mean day and night. We brought good food. We had a pretty good mood. The ambiance was high in our space. So other teams from other tracks showed up and said oh, we don't know about XRP Ledger too much, but I think we would like to be within this community. And the great story about it is that one of the teams that had never heard of XRP Ledger before, or at least never experienced it before, built something really, I think, really innovative during this hackathon. And they stayed within the reach of the community for a few months, and they applied for a grant later on. And they just were awarded a grant to build a ring signature, so sort of a zero knowledge proof without any zero knowledge proof infrastructure on XRP Ledger. So I found it amazing that people who randomly stumbled upon XRP Ledger during a hackathon suddenly became so interested by it that they wanted to apply for a grant and bring innovation. That's really pure innovation. I don't think that anyone before had done it within our ecosystem. So these events are really instrumental. And also for us, for the teams at Commons, spending 2-3 days with developers who usually are young, usually have a lot of energy, don't sleep much. You suddenly understand why you're doing it, who are the people you're going to build it with in the next months, maybe years. The whole point of these events are to broaden the community. Then the challenge is how you keep them around you, how these projects, which some are really meaningful, stay within the range of the community, and you become a sticky community. And for that, I think XRP Ledger, it's not a new community. It's when I introduce XRP Ledger to people, I usually say that it's an old blockchain. It's been in the space for longer than most of the others, and so the community is really well structured. It's still very decentralized, but people are super supportive to newcomers. And especially newcomers who are dedicated, who show interest, who show new ideas. And usually people come and ask a random questions on one of the channels they can reach the community on. And they're like, who should I talk for this? And the answer that comes is like, ask a clear question, because there's no team that's dedicated to supporting you. We're all, volunteering within the community because we're using the technology. We feel that you could be a new addition to the community. We want to help you. Just ask a question. And on top of the documentation and all the learning material that's already out there, I think the community does a really good job at helping each other, lending a hand when people need it.
I've seen a bit of a chicken and egg problem sometimes where developers are interested in working in a particular technology, but they either don't have good ideas of what to build or they don't have financial support. And then there's people who have ideas or who have money, and then they can't find developers who are familiar with the technology. Is that a kind of problem that things like grants or accelerators or matchmaking, what kind of techniques can help with that?
On my side, I really lean towards the matchmaking. I mean, there's certainly grants and accelerators and opportunities like that. Accelerators can be incredibly useful for people needing to get coding quickly. But really, if I may kind of broadly stereotype, right, there's somewhat of a personality difference, for example, between a typical venture capitalist or an entrepreneur and someone who's completely dedicated to developing, right, a C++ coder or someone like that. Being able to bring those personalities together, I think, is one of the most potent things that we can really do to help foster a really strong, resilient, diverse ecosystem that has projects that really have the support that they need. At the end of the day, I've seen quite a few projects get grants, and I've seen many of them benefit enormously from those grants and bootstrap amazing, amazing work off of them. But at the same time, a grant alone, like David, used the phrase sticky community, a grant doesn't bring a sticky community, right? It's just one element that might draw somebody in the door.
Absolutely. And I would add, there are several kinds of developers. The magical developer who's also an entrepreneur and a visionary and a very good operation manager. And it's one of a kind. It's like the unicorn. I think we have a few in the community, to be honest, but this is not the typical developers. Developers tend to be coming at the end of the chain. Like, we have an ID, we find the resources we need to develop this ID, and then we hire developers. So developer can either start within the realm of a startup or a larger organization, but they're just hired to do the job that someone decides. On the other side of the spectrum, you have developers who are totally independent and really want to work and get into the community. They just don't have the idea and the vision for a startup. What we're trying to do at the moment is working with the community to create a backlog of open source IDs. Anyway, everything we do is open source. So publishing a backlog of IDs that any developer could tap into, whether for a hackathon, for a bootcamp, or just for working on your weekends on an ID you want to develop and maybe grow into a startup. And so sharing this backlog of IDs that I invite the community to participate to is, for me, one way to engage more developers in using XRP Ledger and entering the community. But to make the community sticky and sustainable, I would add this word, sustainable, we need to have paying customer. We need to have large organization, putting in the money to develop larger solutions. And I was surprised to see that in France, some major institutions are currently working on developing blockchain infrastructure to run proof of concept about identity, to create a trustable network of documents for administration, for instance. There's a project in production right now in France that allows any bank to query a chain to see if your invoices are valid, are correct. And so these are very innovative solutions. These, I would say, there are a few, not a lot, but a few of these institutions are sort of an island. They're lost somewhere in the ocean. I want to go there and build bigger islands, and that's what we're trying to do.
So what is the XRPL ecosystem doing badly, or what are other blockchains doing better, or what are we missing? Let's try to be a little critical here.
That's a good question. I mean, really, I think it kind of goes back again to having that balance between, rapid development growth, incorporating features that other blockchains are bringing on, and having that same, core stability that appeals to businesses and enterprises, right? Like David said, at the end of the day, it's going to be those business and enterprise use cases that really drive the network forward, that drive use forward, and eventually get us to that place where maybe the XRP ledger is kind of a seamless background aspect in people's lives that they don't even really know, is existing or is handling part of their, daily business as it. So there's always, I think things that we could do better. There's always ways that we could be stronger. I consistently try to point out, if something's not going well, we've had challenges in the past, for example, around infrastructure and latency in the network causing some challenges, in terms of transactions, for example, being gossiped around the network, so being able to talk about those candidly as a community and say, hey, the network isn't absolutely perfect right now. We're having some challenges. It's relatively minor, maybe. People are still using it. Everything's still completely functional, right? But if we can actually come together and really be candid about the fact that, indeed there are weaknesses on this network, there are challenges, like you said earlier, David Schwartz, there's potential disconnect between the end users and the infrastructure operators, right? So being able to find ways to build those bridges, I think, can be very, very beneficial. But those are real challenges that I think require, serious, candid conversations, and if any kinds of bugs or issues or things of that nature come up, it's very important that we be able to address them and talk about them. And I actually think that's historically one of the strength areas is, for example, people like the Foundation, Commons, and Ripple being able to express different points of views, different perspectives, when we do have these challenges. So having diverse voices in the room too, I think really helps with that. I think that was more kind of a summary of the strengths of the community than weaknesses or challenges. I guess right now it feels a little bit to me like things are kind of smooth sailing. So I'm hoping to keep it that way.
I agree with a lot of what you said. And, I think the community is really good at solving its own problems, that discussion can happen, that point of views can be expressed. I would say I'm younger, I'll say, in the community, and I've studied and I've also worked in different chains before. And I see that we're really good at bringing innovation in a very stable and safe way. And the time it took for the community to build new features like NFTs, for instance. But we did that as a community without any hurdle or any major hack or major bottleneck on the network, which I think is, a sign that XRP Ledger is built for business. It's built for stability. So bringing innovation at a very safe space, we do it really well. Bringing radical innovation like other chains can do by creating monsters, with like multiple tentacles, multiple organizations within the organizations. I think for now we still don't do it, but that's something we could in the near future experiment. A chain like Ethereum, what Ethereum is doing, creating multiple innovation labs or innovation groups working independently on different parts of the protocol, I think is a way to bring radical innovation. Another thing we could do better, I say that with a lot of respect, is that we have amazing people in the community that we don't leverage enough. And I want to shoot out here for the work that Ubri is doing and led by Lauren Weymouth. She's put together a network of researchers who are working on XRP Ledger and interoperability with other chains and real world applications. They're not seen enough. I mean, to my point of view or to my knowledge, we could tap more into this network of researchers. These people are really involved and committed to their research. And I don't see them often in the more general communication or discussion channels. And I'm sure other developers are working on in their own space and not getting involved with the community. So one thing we could probably work on is how to tap more into this potential of talents that is already there.
I would add on to that too. You've got so much diversity, I guess. Just the fact that we're saying, the word community, that's a very amorphous term, and there's different XRP Ledger communities all over the world, on every different continent, pretty much every different country even, at this point in time. And so I think too, one of the weaknesses, kind of like David's saying, is there is real potential for those smaller communities to get lost, right? Like several years ago, I started working with more folks in Japan, that were developing on the XRP Ledger. And unfortunately, a contact that I had over there, I kind of lost touch with them. And, I've since I don't really have any idea or not that much of an idea of what's happening, with the XRP Ledger in Japan, despite the fact that there is a lot of active development and a lot of people working on that over there.
So for those that are new, either to the XRP Ledger community or Web3 entirely, what are some of the resources that are available to them, Scott?
Oh, goodness. I guess it really depends on where a person wants to start, how they're coming in. If somebody is an experienced developer or system administrator, of course, GitHub is going to be a really, really good resource. And the documentation as well that's on xrpl.org is going to be a terrific resource for someone coming in with a bit more development experience. I really encourage anyone to read that documentation. I mean, it's got a lot of gems in there. For example, you can kind of exploit the network. We've seen exchanges get exploited in bridges using like a partial payments exploit. That is documented on xrpl.org. So it's very important that newcomers review that documentation if they're actually building and developing things. For folks that aren't necessarily seasoned developers, there's a lot of other resources as well. There's tons and tons of community resources where people can actually engage face-to-face, ask questions. Discord is one, for example. Ripple runs a Discord. The XRP Ledger Foundation, for example, Daniel, one of our employees, is very, very active in providing support, within the Discord there. And there's other similar forums. There's a lot of people on Twitter, Reddit, other kind of similar communities there. Also on xrpl.org for folks that are a little bit less, on kind of the developer end of things, and for developers as well. There's reflection blogs highlighting different projects, on a routine basis. There's also a job board on the website there, and a bunch of other useful things for community members to get engaged with. We have a community ambassador program as well that the foundation runs, so you can get connected with that. We need to update that webpage on xrpl.org. But if you want to engage with those ambassadors, potentially become an ambassador, they're a really good resource for, kind of the foundation's vision behind the ambassador program is, how can we have faces and points of contact if an enterprise or business wants to start building on the XRP Ledger, where they can just get in touch with a face and start getting the resources that they need quickly. So there's really tons and tons of different venues out there ranging from, do you want to actually engage in a dialogue with someone through, do you want to sit quietly at home and read documentation and just, type away at a terminal? Whatever it is that suits you, you can find a resource to actually engage with it.
And I would add, you listed most of them, and we did a little research work on our side and tried to list all the learning material that were available online to learn about XRP Ledger. We came up with a list of more than 100 lines, and so this is really spread out. But I think XRPL.org is the entry door for anyone who really wants to learn and connect. We're adding to that a YouTube channel that will centralize MOOCs, online classes, tutorials, recipes, builders sharing information on how to get started with XRP Ledger or how to run your first node, or like a lot of material that's produced by the community itself will be centralized on Commons YouTube channel. Another piece of content we're working on at the moment is called the community report, the quarterly community report. We're still trying to find a title to this quarterly community report, but basically providing news and insights about the protocol itself, about coming amendments, but also trying to put a face on the people who are building on XRP Ledger. I think that's really an important part of belonging to a community. We mentioned earlier what a sticky community is. I think a sticky community rewards and praises the people who make the community up. So, interviewing people who are building on XRP Ledger, understanding better why they're building on XRP Ledger and what's the intent of their projects. And probably after Apex, we'll be releasing the first report.
So you mentioned Apex, something that hasn't come up before. How about suggesting people show up in person at Apex if they're interested in participating in the community?
That would be amazing. Last year I attended Apex, and it was for me the best possible way to enter the community. I met so many people, started to understand better concept that you read online. Suddenly you hear people talking about them. You can ask questions. People come with a very open mind, and people really want to meet other members. So of course you have core contributors who all know each other because they've been contributing for a decade, but other newcomers who come with new ideas and have been active on Twitter or Discord. Suddenly, you can put a face on a nickname or a handle, and that's very powerful. And I can share my story, but at the end of the 3 days of Apex, I had befriended a lot of people there, and I was really pumped for the idea I was pushing with Commons. So I would encourage anyone who's not too far from Amsterdam to come and spend a few days there during Apex.
And so that's September 6th through the 8th at the Leonardo Royal Hotel in Amsterdam. I know all three of us are going to be there in person. Scott, what are you excited about?
What am I not excited about? I'm really, really stoked. I mean, honestly, I just love learning about all the different projects. I love hearing about what everyone's working on. For me, it's really, really exciting to kind of have that opportunity to be able to introduce more people to each other and, help them benefit from one another's projects. So I guess really I'm most excited to see what everyone's been working on, but also too to just spend time with the community as well.
Yeah, I'm really excited. 2 jam-packed days of XRP Ledger-related sessions. It's going to be super exciting. We have a special offer for our listeners, a 25% discount on Apex registration. Just go to apexdevsummit.com, apexdevsummit.com, and enter the promo code BlockStars25, all lowercase, no spaces, at checkout. So we're almost out of time. I always like to torture my guests. This gives me great pleasure by making them get out their crystal balls, because I hate when podcast hosts ask me to get out my crystal ball. We got to do it. Scott, David, what are your predictions for the future of Web3 and communities? What developments, challenges, opportunities? How the community is going to evolve with the tech? What do you guys foresee?
Well, if I may start, I foresee that XRP Ledger will be widely studied, if not adopted, by large organizations. This is the intuition I get from the conversation I'm having at the moment. We're entering, as Commons, in different organizations and associations, and the level of the conversation we have is a clear differentiator for me. The idea of running infrastructure starts to emerge from potential partners. I think the one thing that we didn't touch on, but was not a good selling point maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago, is now clearly a good selling point for XRP Ledger, which is there's no incentive for operators. So if you run a node, you don't get any reward. You don't make money out of running infrastructure. And, the crypto space is not where it was 2, 3 years ago. And so with the tide going back, what's left on the shore is projects that are meaningful, that are visionary, that really want to invest on their own infrastructure. And this is the level of the conversation we are having at the moment. So if I can foresee, maybe not 10 years from now, but maybe 2, 3 years from now, would be XRP Ledger being adopted by core public institutions running their own infrastructure, interacting with the XRP Ledger ecosystem.
Kind of similar. I think for me, my biggest prediction or hope, however you want to phrase it, is that people forget about blockchain and the XRP ledger. It's not discussed. It's not part of everyday life. It's not something that people are trying to wrap their heads around, right? We've gotten to a point where nobody cares at all how a cell phone works. All they care about is, can they look up things on the cell phone? Can they text people? Can they make phone calls? You don't need to have really in-depth technical knowledge. And I'm hoping as we move forward and more businesses and enterprises and universities for that matter continue adopting and researching and engaging with the technology, that we really get to a place where it's seamless in people's lives, whether that's moving money across borders or within borders, having NFTs that represent different assets, whatever that may be. People don't need to necessarily know they're using the XRP ledger or any blockchain for that matter to benefit from the increased security, the resilience, all those other benefits that really, really come with it. So my hope is that a lot of the conversations, and my prediction is a lot of the conversations, we're having today about how is this going to get adopted, what's going to happen moving forward are going to be largely irrelevant, hopefully here in just a very short period of time too. It really has been, in my opinion, since I got into this, in 2012, 2013, there's been a monstrous shift, in terms of enterprises very quietly engaging with the technology and doing it in a way, that it's very professional and beneficial to them personally rather than being, kind of a smoke and mirrors show.
I'm into that.
That's our time. I'd like to thank my guests, Scott Branson from the XRPL Foundation and David Schwartz from the XRPL Commons.
Thank you, David.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both for joining me today. Again, it was a pleasure hosting you on Ripple's podcast, BlockStars. Looking forward to seeing both of you in person at Apex soon. And listeners, thank you for tuning in. And don't forget to use code BlockStars25 for 25% off at Apex registration, where you can meet all three of us in person and come back with some insights to scale your project or just understand more of what's going on. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me on Twitter at Joelkatz, JoelKatz. And remember to follow at RippleXDev on Twitter to keep up with the latest industry news, technical updates, and cool new developer projects in the community. See you around the blockchain.